What would drive someone to deliberately vanish? Not physically, but psychologically. To walk away from every label, every role, every identity they ever wore. No dramatic escape, no faked death, just silence. What kind of person chooses to erase themselves on purpose? And what does that even mean? Here's a better question. Could you do it? Could you delete every trace of who you think you are and still recognize yourself in the mirror? We live in a world addicted to identity. We cling to names, jobs, political beliefs, aesthetics, trauma, even our star signs, as if they're lifeboats in an ocean of chaos. Social media tells you to build your personal brand, as if you're a product to sell. Culture tells you to find your passion, as if your value lies only in productivity. Your friends and family expect you to be consistent, predictable, explainable. But what if that's the trap? In this video, we're going to tell the story of a man who decided to disappear from himself. Not by running away, but by peeling off everything he wasn't. His name, his profession, his status, his routines. Layer by layer, he dismantled the very idea of who he was. At first, it looked like madness. But what emerged wasn't insanity. It was something most people never experience. Freedom, stillness, self-possession, maybe even truth. This isn't just his story, it's yours too. Because whether you realize it or not, you're also wearing a mask, maybe dozens of them. Masks you didn't choose. Some inherited, some sold to you, and some you built just to survive. But the question is, are they you? And if not, what would happen if you took them off? Along the way, we'll bring in insights from Carl Jung, who warned us about the shadow we avoid. From Marcus Aurelius, who taught us how to reclaim our minds from the noise. From modern psychology and neuroscience, which reveal just how fragmented the self really is. And as we follow the man who erased himself, you might begin to see this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming no one at all. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might not just challenge how you see the world. It might make you question whether you've ever truly seen yourself at all. What if everything you think you are, your name, your memories, your tastes and opinions, was just a story you've been rehearsing for years? A character you've been trained to play. From the moment we're born, we're wrapped in layers of labels. Son, daughter, smart, shy, successful, failure. We wear these labels like armor. But at what cost? We build identities like fortresses, brick by brick, school achievements, relationships, social roles, and then spend the rest of our lives defending them from anything that might crack the walls. And yet underneath it all, we feel the creeping dread. What if this isn't really me? Psychologists call it the narrative self, the story you tell yourself about who you are. But here's the twist. That story is constantly changing. New memories overwrite old ones. Your opinions shift. You forget things that once defined you. So if your identity is always in flux, who's the real you? Is there even such a thing? Carl Jung believed that most people never truly meet their authentic selves. Instead, they live as masks, what he called the persona. It's not fake, necessarily. It's what the world expects from you, the friend, the leader, the artist. But the more you cling to the persona, the more you bury the deeper, unconscious self. You become a performance, a well-rehearsed act. Now think about that. If everything you show to the world is a response to what the world wants, how much of you is really yours? How much is borrowed, inherited, or engineered by the expectations of others? That's where he started. The man who erased himself wasn't escaping the world. He was confronting this haunting realization that everything he thought he was had been chosen for him. His name, his habits, even his voice, none of it felt truly his. So, he asked a terrifying question. What happens if I stop playing the part? That question is the crack in the mirror. It's the first fracture in the illusion. Because once you see your identity as a construct, a mask, a myth, you can't unsee it. And once you realize that, the idea of erasing yourself isn't about vanishing. It's about finally seeing what's underneath the mask. But how do you even begin to let go of an identity you've spent your entire life building? How far would you go to find the truth behind the performance? That's what he set out to discover. And what he did next, no one saw coming. At some point, he realized that understanding the illusion wasn't enough. You can read every Jungian essay, meditate on the nature of self, talk about ego death and freedom. But unless you do something, you're still trapped in the performance. So he made a decision, one most of us would never dare to entertain. He would begin erasing every trace of the person he was told to be. Not physically, not in the way that means fleeing into the woods or faking your death, but mentally, socially, digitally, psychologically. His mission, to kill the false self. It started with silence. He stopped reacting to things that once triggered him. He let people talk without correcting them. He deleted social media accounts, one by one. No goodbye posts, no explanations, just digital vanishing. He removed himself from every group that had defined him. No more political debates, no more club memberships, no more chasing meaning through belonging. He called it subtractive living. Instead of seeking more experiences to find himself, he started removing the unnecessary ones, the ones layered on top of his soul like noise over signal. He left a high-paying job that once gave him identity, not to chase a dream, but because he realized he never chose that path. Not really. It was inherited ambition, a life bought with borrowed dreams, and he didn't want to keep paying interest on someone else's desires. What happens, he asked himself, when I stop doing things for validation? The answer, discomfort, loneliness, a terrifying silence, but also something else. He noticed strange things. The voice in his head, once busy narrating, judging, rehearsing, comparing, grew quieter. He could hear the wind again, the ticking of the clock, the sound of his own breath, the space between thoughts. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about how he appeared. He was just existing, not performing, just being. But that's when the real war began, because the world doesn't like when you stop playing the role it gave you. Friends asked if he was depressed. Family thought he was losing himself. Co-workers said he was throwing away everything he worked for, and in their eyes, he was. But what they couldn't see, what they refused to see, was that he wasn't breaking down. He was breaking free. The decision to disappear wasn't an act of escape. It was an act of confrontation, not against the world, but against the illusion of identity, against the persona, against the constant need to be someone. Because until you step outside that performance, you'll never know who you really are. You'll only know who you were told to be. And the scariest part, he didn't know what he would find either. The man who erases himself has no guarantees, no safety net, no clear destination, only a question. What's left when you let go of everything you're not? When you strip everything away, the name, the job title, the personality you curated for others. What's left isn't peace, at least not at first. What's left is a void, and the man who erased himself was now standing at the edge of it, staring into something vast, dark, and mercilessly quiet. This is where most people turn back. This is where the ego screams the loudest, not because it's powerful, but because it's dying, and dying things thrash. He began to question his sanity. Without the constant affirmation of others, his mind played tricks on him. Was this a mistake? Am I disappearing or just dissolving into nothing? His internal voice, once an ally, became a saboteur. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, the part of ourselves we bury, the one made of fear, rage, and repressed desire. It came crawling out of the corners now that there were no distractions left to keep it buried. He remembered moments from childhood, not memories but impressions, the sting of not being chosen, the ache of pretending to be someone he wasn't, the quiet bitterness of living under someone else's expectations. These weren't just memories. They were ghosts, and now, with nothing left to perform, they all came home to haunt him. This wasn't enlightenment. It was war, a war of thoughts, habits, identities. His ego tried to rebuild itself in subtle ways. Why not be the enlightened guy now? The spiritual one, the minimalist, the mysterious outsider. But each time it tried to adopt a new mask, he saw it for what it was. Another costume, another trap. Even being the man who erased himself could become an identity. And so, again, he let go. During this storm, he kept a single question written on a scrap of paper by his bed. What if I am not any of this? He read it every night. He wasn't looking for an answer. He was trying to sit with the silence that question created, because in that silence, something strange began to happen. Without all the noise, without the identity, without the constant me narrative looping in his head, there was still awareness. There was still presence, not a person, not a role, just witnessing, just being. And that's when the shift began, not suddenly, not with fireworks, but like the slow rising of dawn. He realized he wasn't erasing himself to disappear. He was peeling away everything that was never really him. The war wasn't destroying him. It was liberating him from the prison of a false self. He wasn't empty. He was clear. He began to feel lighter, not euphoric, just still, like a quiet forest after a storm. There were still thoughts, but they didn't stick. Still emotions, but they passed through. Still moments of ego, but now they were seen, not obeyed. And through this, a strange paradox emerged. By erasing himself, he finally began to see who he really was. Not in words, not in traits, but in presence, the kind that doesn't need an audience to exist. It was in absolute stillness that it arrived, not as a thought, not as a vision, but as a realization so clear it didn't need explanation. He had never really existed the way he thought he did. The identity he spent years protecting, defending, building, wasn't real. It was a story, a survival strategy dressed up as personality, and now, stripped bare, he saw the absurdity of it. He had erased a lie, not a self. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And now, it was clear. His life hadn't been his. It had been the product of unconscious forces, the desire to be loved, the fear of rejection, the need to perform, to be seen, to be someone. But all of that dissolved in the void. And what remained wasn't a better version of himself. It was awareness, detached, unbothered, whole. He had feared erasing himself would lead to nothingness, but instead it led to everything, because in losing the character, he became the observer. In losing the script, he discovered the stage. In letting go of the illusion, he saw the truth that had always been there. You are not the thoughts you think. You are not the name you carry. You are not even the story you believe about yourself. You are the witness beneath it all. And with that came freedom, true freedom, not the kind sold in self-help books or promised by gurus, but the kind that doesn't need permission. He didn't need to prove anything anymore, didn't need to perform, didn't need to belong. He belonged to reality itself, and reality asks for nothing. It just is. The irony. By erasing himself, he became more real than ever before, not because he added anything, but because he stopped clinging. It wasn't enlightenment with golden halos or cosmic downloads. It was simple, almost laughably simple. Be here, fully, without needing to be anyone at all. And suddenly, he could breathe, not metaphorically, literally. He inhaled, and it felt like the first time in decades that his lungs had tasted air without resistance. His breath no longer fed a persona, it simply sustained life. And in that, he found joy. Not the ecstatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't fade because it's not based on anything that can be taken away. It was the climax, not just of his journey, but of all journeys that turn inward. The place where the seeker disappears, and all that remains is the sought, not as an object, not as an idea, but as the silent presence behind the eyes, watching the whole play unfold, without needing to be the actor anymore. But erasing yourself comes with a cost, and it's not one people talk about. Freedom sounds beautiful, but what they don't tell you is this. Freedom is lonely at first. When the man returned to the world, nothing had changed except him, and that was enough to make everything feel different. Conversations became strange. Relationships felt thin. The roles others expected him to play, the agreeable friend, the overachiever, the people pleaser, didn't fit anymore. And people noticed. You've changed. Yes, but they didn't say it like a compliment. The world doesn't know what to do with someone who no longer plays the game. Because when you stop needing validation, you stop being predictable, and people find unpredictability threatening. There were friends who drifted away, confused by his silence. There were opportunities lost, not because he failed, but because he no longer cared to pretend. The man who erased himself didn't fit into the machine anymore. And that's the hidden conflict. The true battle isn't the erasure. It's surviving what comes after. It's realizing that most of your life was built around a mask, and when the mask disappears, so does the stage you built around it. It's painful, it's quiet, it's disorienting, but it's also honest. And for the first time, he could look in the mirror and not flinch, because there was no performance left, just presence. But here's the twist, and it's important. This disappearance wasn't a loss. It was a rebirth, because in shedding the old self, he finally had space to create, not out of fear, but from truth. The connections he began to form were real. The silence no longer felt empty, it felt alive. There was no need to impress, no image to manage. Life simplified. But in that simplicity, he discovered depth. So yes, there is a cost. The man who erased himself lost the comfort of illusion. But what he gained was priceless. The ability to live unchained, not by others, not by ego, not even by the voice in his head. He didn't escape the world. He just stopped pretending to be someone he never was. And then, it hit him. The final truth. The man hadn't erased himself. He had revealed himself. The version of him that people knew. The one that chased approval, that played roles, that built identities out of fear. That wasn't him. That was noise, static, a desperate attempt to be something in a world terrified of nothingness. But when he let it all go, the ego, the performance, the constant mental commentary, he didn't disappear. He emerged. And what emerged wasn't grand, wasn't impressive, but it was real. And for the first time, the voice in his head was quiet. Not because it was silenced, but because it was no longer a dictator. It had become what it was always meant to be, a tool, not a tyrant. The man who erased himself didn't become someone new. He became no one. And in that no one, he found space for everything. No fear, no need to be seen, no hunger for validation, just awareness, just being. And with that, he understood. Freedom is not in becoming more, it's in needing less. That was the final revelation. He hadn't run away. He had returned, not to the world, but to himself. And the self he found wasn't a character. It was a mirror, reflecting life as it is, without distortion. Still, clear, whole. So, who was he in the end? He was every one of us. The part that gets lost in the noise. The version buried under titles, jobs, expectations, trauma, and dreams that weren't even ours to begin with. The man who erased himself didn't vanish. He peeled back the layers we've all been told we need to survive. And what was underneath? Something terrifying and liberating, it turns out. Erasing yourself isn't destruction. It's honesty. It's standing in front of the mirror with no filters, no costume, and realizing that who you thought you were was just a story. And if you're brave enough to drop that story, even for a moment, maybe, just maybe, you'll meet the one who's been quietly watching it all along. The one who doesn't need a name, or approval, or certainty, just presence. Now ask yourself, are you ready to do the same? Or will you keep performing a role in a play you never auditioned for? If this video left you questioning everything, good. That's the beginning. Click the video on screen now to go even deeper down the rabbit hole. But remember, once you start erasing the mask, there's no going back. You've just witnessed a story that most people will never dare to face, because looking at yourself without illusions is the most terrifying thing you can do. But if you made it this far, you're not most people. You're part of a rare few who are ready to question everything. So now I want you to do two things. First, comment below. What part of you would you erase if you could? Would it be the people pleaser, the overthinker, the silent rage? Let's open that space together. This channel is a mirror for minds like yours. Second, don't stop here. Tap the video on screen. It's the next step in this path. And it will shake what you think you know about identity, time, and reality itself. Because the truth, the world we see is a projection. And someone, somewhere, is still watching. And you might be closer to them than you think.